Well, the first thing is, when is your student ready for individual lessons? And for me, um, that's about the first etude, uh, kata, if you will. I want to see them do that. I want to see that they have a pretty good command of the first etude, because that tells me a couple of things. The most important thing it tells me is that they really want to do this, and they've been putting time and energy into learning the first etude. If there's no improvement in the etude from the first time they do it to the 10th time they do it, they're not getting individual lessons. And I don't care if they could pay me $1,000. It's a waste of my time and their money. Here's a tip for you. Never trade your time for money. Because if you give the money back, can they give you your time back? No. So, that's just a little advice from my old man, incidentally. So the student has a fairly good command of the material in the first etude, and they're ready to go on and really get in there and learn it and refine it and perfect it and so on. So in general, an individual lesson has 7 parts to it. And all the lessons follow this formula or format. So it doesn't matter what the lesson is about or which weapon we're using or whatever. They all follow this model. The first part of the lesson is the greeting. The lesson starts when the student arrives at the cell. And whatever you establish with them, how are you doing, how's your job going, how's your wife and kids, how's your dog, whatever it is, right, that acknowledges them, acknowledges their uniqueness, confirms your interest in them as a person, it makes them feel at home, makes them feel like, yeah, this cat knows me, this is a good place for me to be, makes them feel welcome. All that stuff, that's before anything else, right? Let that happen. The next part is the opening of the lesson. And here's where I use ritual as part of the groove, part of the mantra, part of the way to bring you into the mindset you need to have a good lesson. And it's very simple. We stand at a certain distance and you draw your sword and we salute each other, but we do it in a very particular way. And we always do it that way every time. That's the opening. Now you come on guard. The next part of the lesson, what is this? Part 3? Okay, part 3 is, let's call this the warm-up. And what the warm-up is it's another way to bring your mind and spirit into the lesson. We do some exercise that you know very well and that you do very well. And again, that's going to vary from individual to individual. For some people, many people, most people probably, it's just a straight thrust. Boom. Simplest thing in the world that you can ever do with a sword, a straight thrust. Boom. Just that. Just that. Grease that groove. Get your spirit ready. Get in the flow of what it means to be connected to that sword. Right? That's the warm-up. Okay, then the warm-up leads into the fourth part. Are we on 4? Okay. The fourth part, which is, let's call that the body of the lesson. Okay? And that's where you're going to work today. And that is determined by a Socratic progression of, asking questions with the sword. All right? And what I mean by that is, I give a certain cue with the sword. That's the question. And if the student responds appropriately to that cue, that's the answer, right? So the question is, can you do this? And the answer is, yeah, I can do that. Oh, okay. Can you do this? And the answer is, yeah, I can do that. And I say, oh, can you do this? And they say, no, I can't do that. Boom. That's what we're going to work on. So you work your way through stuff until you get to a place where you ask the question and the answer from the student is no, I can't do that. And that's there you go. And that's not going to be the same thing every day, every time, you know, because you can't step in the same river twice, man. Every time your student comes for a lesson, they're a different person. They've got stuff going on in their life. One day they may have a great lesson. Next week they come back and they have a shitty lesson because stuff is going on. So this is all in the moment, today. What do we need to work on today? Not what did we work on last week. Not what should we be working on to progress according to this table of things I saw in a book. Right? But what do you need to work on today for you, for your skill, for your goal, for your spirit, for your life, to enhance you? What's going to do that for you today? Today. So we work on that for a while. That's the body of the lesson. And I want to get you to a point where whatever it is we're working on, you do it pretty damn good. Maybe not perfect. But there's been big improvement from the introduction of that element until now. And here's the trick. You need to know when your student's skills or performance starts to deteriorate and stop just before that happens. All right? So you have to be on your game. You have to be observant. You have to focus on your student just as much as you would focus on an opponent in a fight. Only instead of for your benefit, it's for their benefit, right? So here's where the little tells in. Are they starting to sweat? When they're burned out, do they have certain facial expressions? Do they start to fidget? Does their stance change? Does their balance change? What are the things that tell you this is as far as we should go today? You've got to know that about your student. So when you get to that point, you break off, take a breath, and then you start the cool down. What was that part 5? Okay, the cool down. The cool down is a lot like the warm up. You select for the cool down, once again, something that they do well, something they know well, something they're perfectly comfortable with, you know, something they can blast through and really feel like, yeah, you know, pow, you know. A lot of times what I do is just simple thrust and lunge. Just a thrust and lunge, you know. But I want power. I want them to knock me through the fucking wall with that lunge. I want them to explode their energy out and completely conquer their environment. When they're done with this lesson, I want them to step out into the world like they're a fucking lion. You know? That's the spirit I want to leave them with. That's the cool down. After the cool down, I typically use 3 perfect lunges as our cool down. Just 3 perfect lunges, but I want everything out of you. I want everything you've got. And they have it too, and they'll give it to you. Okay, after the cool down is the closing. Again, ritual. So we have our places. We salute each other in a particular way. We set our arms aside, we shake hands, and we say, merci, thank you. Right? So that's the closing. What comes after that? Okay, so now technically people will say the lesson is over. Yeah, that's what you think. Right? Because after the closing, we have what I call the valediction. And if you know what that means, look it up. Right? The valediction, and that includes, I'll ask something like, how do you feel? What do you think of that? You know, about things that we've done or principles we touched on. And the valediction may be 2 minutes or maybe 2 hours. All right? Because here's where whatever the student's thoughts are, whatever the questions are, wherever they want to go, whatever ideas this triggers in them. Maybe something you did in the lesson triggers an idea, or maybe that applies to something else in their life, their job, their boss, their lover, whatever, their dog, their horse, who knows, right? What's cooking? What's the connection to their life that they're making from the lesson that they just had? No, maybe no big deal. No, it's a 2-minute valediction. See ya, George. That was great. Glad to see ya. Can't wait to get back and do some more. Right? And you should mean that. And if you don't mean that, you shouldn't be giving fucking lessons. And then George feels that way. See, it's like, I learned this from horses. They'll follow your lead. If you're cool and have good energy, they'll do that. So you're always setting your student an example. That's really important to remember. Okay, so this discussion, God, could be anything. Could be, there's no holds barred, and I'll stay with a student. I mean, essentially, I'll stay with a student as long as they want to talk. And I'll talk about whatever they need to talk about. I don't care what it is. If this connects to, politics, history, organic chemistry, insects, what else? Writing, emergency medical services. If some of the other things we talk about, love, sex, and death, the whole scene, man. I'll go wherever you need to go. And then when that kind of comes down, then we're done. So is that 7 parts, right? Yeah. So that's my lesson structure. That's the model I kind of follow. Seems to work okay.